Okay, for those who haven't been on my channel for a while, basically about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, it was in September of 1998. Actually, I started a Facebook group called Californians for Classic Car Smog Exemptions. Basically, the goal of the group is to get the smog year, the smog cutoff year for classic vehicles moved up from the current where you have to get anything 1976 and newer smog that's gas powered. And I've made some videos. There's actually been some assembly bills that have come through in efforts to get the year moved up, and unfortunately nothing has happened because of it. And now I realize some of my subscribers don't live in California, could probably care less about what's going on in California, but this is primarily aimed to those here in California who are interested in this, since there's people who could not join the Facebook group because they're not on Facebook. And basically, I told them I was going to give them updates periodically as to what's going on with efforts and what's going on with the group. So here we go. So basically, there was Assembly Bill 1972 and Assembly Bill 2225, which came up in the Assembly. And unfortunately, they were never voted on. Of course, we had the current virus and resulting pandemic here in 2020. So I think it was kind of unanimous in the group. We kind of agreed, well, you know, it's not exactly a pressing life or death issue, and we assumed that the state assembly and state senate were focused on, as you would say, more important things than worrying about classic vehicles. But we've reached the end here of 2020, just about. They weren't voted on, which means the bills are pretty much dead, from what I understand. So right now, I believe there's no current bills for this. If someone else knows something that I don't, please let me know. But as far as I know, there's no current bills to get the smog year moved up. Things that were kind of discussed in the group. Newsom actually brought out a new gas vehicle ban starting in 2035, so 15 years from now. Apparently there's not going to be any new gas-powered vehicles sold in the state of California. Obviously, currently this does not affect any classic vehicles in California. I don't see them like immediately just stop selling gasoline for cars. Obviously, we're gonna have to see how this plays out. That's basically all I have to say about that, because it does not have anything to do with vintage cars right now as it stands. But it's understandable why there would be concern for this. So I'm going to talk about the group focus going forward. So we have Californians for Classic Car Smog Exemptions. Currently, we're over 2,200 members, which I think is pretty good. I think some of my older videos, I was kind of amazed when we got over 200 members. And it's actually been growing pretty steadily, despite the fact there's no current assembly bills. But being a two-year-old group, primarily focused on passing one sort of legislation in a single state, I consider that to be pretty much a victory, especially since it's continuing to grow, thanks to word of mouth, thanks to the members, and people who watch these videos and are on the Facebook group. The group right now, I think our focus is the preservation of our classic vehicles and the history of those classic vehicles. So we're trying to preserve these cars for future generations to enjoy, and so people can take them to shows and different events and things like that. And what the group has kind of been doing lately is helping folks. A lot of people will post in the group asking about specific smog-related questions. Say their car failed, they will post their smog information with the readout from the smog station. And there's a lot of members of the group who either worked in that industry, are mechanics, worked at smog shops, or just hobbyists who are very knowledgeable about these sort of things. And they've actually been assisting people and giving them tips as to get their car legally through the California emissions test. And I think that's really where the focus of the group has kind of become lately. Since with everything going on, you know, not a lot of events and things like that, and nothing really going on in the assembly. And I think we really need to continue that. I'd like to see in the future, maybe if there could be different chapters around the states where guys can get together who are knowledgeable to assist people to try to get their cars legally up to par for California emissions testing. So I don't know, we'll see where that goes. But I mean, it'd be nice to see more of these cars. And I like it because there's a lot of fear for these 1976 and newer cars that people are going to be afraid to put money in them because they don't know if all of a sudden the law is going to change or if they're going to have a problem getting a certain part to get it through emissions testing. And it'd be good to have like that peer-to-peer, where guys help each other because, we're kind of in all this together. So I think that would be a good idea. Also, I could see the group since, we really haven't gotten anywhere with getting the smog year bumped up, but it'd be nice to push for better laws for the cars that are currently still in those years where they get emissions testing. One of the things that I think that was been pretty big was getting it so there would not be a visual test. Supposedly it's in the vehicle code where if you have a historic vehicle that you're exempt from the visual test, but you'd have to go through a BAR representative, and there's really been a lot of confusion about that. No one has told us they've been able to do this, and it would be nice to get it to where people can start doing smog tests. And if your car, does the emissions test and is clean enough to be legal and is also passes the fuel cap and the evap test and everything else, that they could still get it through despite the fact if it would have failed a visual test, which I believe was the intent of the law. But as far as I know, that law has not really. There's been no enforcement there where you can get stuff through without a visual test. So it'd be really nice to be able to say use parts that aren't certified for CARB, because it costs a lot of money for these companies to certify stuff for CARB. And let's face it, if it's not one of your more common engines, these parts are not going to get certified. So for instance, it would be nice to be able to put like an electronic fuel injection on a carbureted vehicle without worrying that it's going to fail the visual, when obviously electronic fuel injection is going to make the engine perform better, and it's also going to have it put out fewer emissions generally. And if it did that, it'd be nice to be able to get it through emissions, because that would be like a win-win where the car would run better, would last longer, and get better fuel economy and put out less emissions, and the person would be able to continue to enjoy it without worry about the parts that they used. Another thing is, and this is a huge one, this is one that we get a lot of comments about, it would be nice to work with CARB, maybe get some laws passed where it would be easier to get the modern engine swaps allowed. That's your Coyote swaps, your LS swaps, things like that. Because right now, the way it's set up, a lot of people are just afraid to even attempt it. I would go as far as to say the majority of modern engine swaps on vintage cars in California are generally on vehicles that are already smog exempt. And there's definitely a reason for that. I think the law goes back to probably like the 1970s, or when you got into like the late 70s, early 80s cars. A lot of your so-called performance vehicles, your Corvettes, your Mustangs, your Camaros, your Firebirds and things like that, the performance just wasn't there. I mean, the cars had a lot of emissions equipment on it, and I think there was a lot of people that would actually go find, say, like a late 60s, early 70s muscle car from before the emissions stuff came into play, and they would like put, say, a big block out of like a 69 Chevelle and put it in say a 79 Camaro. So I think that's really where it goes back to in those laws is why they're there. Moving on to current day, guys just want to put like an LS in like a 40, 50-year-old car, and the ones that are actually still have emissions requirements on them, it's hard because they want you to do the fuel tank and everything else go through a BAR, and I think there's so much confusion there. It'd be nice to get that sort of ironed out. And I mean, there's even the E-Rod engine, which is produced by General Motors. It's an LS engine that comes with a CARB certificate, so you can install it without doing all the fuel tank and all that stuff. But since it's a brand new engine, it's a brand new crate engine, the cost of it is very, very high. It'd be easier for guys to be able to go pull an LS out of, like, say, an old truck or an SUV or a van, which in the state of California, you can't put a truck, van, or SUV engine into a car that's currently something that needs to get smogged. Whereas it's pretty obvious that if you have a late 70s car, even if you have an engine from a truck from an early 2000s truck, that it's going to put out less emissions than the engine that was originally in the late 70s car. So that's something I'd like to see get worked on. I think even if you explain it to any environmentalist, like, hey, we want to put a modern engine in a vintage car, it doesn't take much to understand that that's a benefit to everybody, that, these guys want to put a modern engine in that's going to get better emissions, run better, get better gas mileage, and keep these cars running and running cleaner. So it'd be nice to see something where we can work with them, get some sort of legislation passed where these sort of things can happen, and then eventually work towards getting these cars exempted completely. Anything over, say, 35 or 40 years old would be nice on a rolling basis, as most people kind of agree that the rolling exemption is generally what most people want. But I would like to see maybe us work towards something like that, where it's easier to get these modern engines into these vintage cars. And as with the E-Rod, I mean, most of the cars I've seen with the E-Rod were actually pre-smog cars anyway. So generally they wouldn't even need the certificate. I don't think there's a lot of people buying new LS engines to put in like late 70s cars right now, because the values just aren't there. Maybe on your Corvette or a Firebird or a Camaro, but not on a lot of the other stuff. Getting past, when we get through this pandemic and things start opening up, obviously it'd be nice to get another bill in there, and of course get a lot of support for that bill. I'd also like to see the group become more visual at various car events and car shows and things like that. And so far it's been good on the word of mouth and getting people into the group and getting people active in this and writing letters and things like that. But I think the more numbers we have, the better the chance we have of anything getting passed. So that's basically where I'm at for an update for any classic car smog exemptions. As always, I'm going to put a link to the Californians for Classic Car Smog Exemptions Facebook group. I'm not sure if there was a petition, but I believe it was for AB210, which was a while ago. So I'm guessing that petition's no longer valid. If obviously if there's another bill in the works, we'll get another petition going for that. But for now, be sure to join the group if you're on Facebook so you can learn more. Also, subscribe to this channel, because I will be doing periodic updates, although it's been a while since I did the last one. And until next time, I'll be seeing you.